All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of 1.73 Mission Over Measure. Today we're joined by Craig Huston. Craig, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. I'd like to start off with just asking you a little bit about yourself and what you do in business right now, and just expand on that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Preston, for inviting me on. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with some amazing people. So I am a business coach. I work with business owners, predominantly owners of privately held businesses in the lower middle market, several multi-generational family businesses. Just something I really enjoy doing. I am kind of a industry agnostic person. I believe that business is business and leadership is leadership. And so really working with the leaders of businesses, focused on them, helping them grow and scale their business and invest in their team and impact the communities that they serve.
I love it. How'd you get into this? How'd you get into this business? You know, when we were talking earlier before we hit the record button, Craig, I heard GE, I heard Dad's business. Help us understand a little bit more about kind of that backdrop.
Yeah, the resume that you could never build on your own, right?
Right.
It kind of happens. So I grew up with a front row seat to all the drama of entrepreneurialism. My dad and his partners had a civil engineering firm. That firm recently celebrated its 67th anniversary, still around, thriving, actually just had a record year. My dad is no longer involved in the business. He exited, now over 20 years ago. He's in his late 80s. Kind of serves as the honorary CEO emeritus of the business, had a very strong contribution to the employees, the owners, and to the community. So accomplished a lot. I went the other direction. They were a civil engineering company. I'm an airplane guy. So I went into aviation and was in the jet engine business for a long time. I did that for quite a while. Started out in Phoenix, moved to Florida, and then found myself at a transition when we were closing a business here. Switched to another company instead of relocating with the company I was with. And that company, 6 months after I got there, was acquired by GE. And kind of by virtue of the fact of being the last man standing, had an opportunity to run that business for a while. And then left there and started my own consulting practice. Very involved. Our family's very involved in our church community. And a very unplanned thing happened in, I'm going to say 2003, I think it was, where the church asked if I'd be interested in serving on the staff. Totally never even entered my mind that would be part of the career path. And I agreed to do something for 18 months. That turned into 8.5 years. That then transitioned into a local community foundation that focused on philanthropy, working with high net worth individuals and families, many of whom were business owners. Transitioned back into aviation to help a friend out. He was also involved in ministry as a missionary kid born in Africa, and he launched a revitalization program that's been quite impressive of the hospital that his parents had founded in West Africa. And so while he was doing that, he asked if I'd help him with his business. Did that until he wrapped up that project. And then after that, was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And people that I had worked with through the foundation and through our church had said, well, Craig, we come to you for advice anyways. Why don't you become an executive coach and we'll actually start paying you? So kind of invited by clients to become an executive coach. So I started this business in 2016 to do just that. And it's since morphed into more full-on business coaching.
I love that, where folks that know, love, and trust you are, I'm hearing, pointing you in a particular direction or inviting you to get into something that perhaps you weren't thinking about a moment before.
I was not thinking about it a moment before, no.
Yeah. What was the transition like going from, I mean, when I hear GE, I imagine big business. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it like making that transition from, well, first of all, I'm going to ask, were you an engineer? Were you in sales? Like what was the work you were doing?
Yeah. Um, it depends on who you ask. But no, my degree is in engineering. So I was a mechanical engineer.
Okay.
Spent 2 years in engineering. Uh, didn't want to do that for a living. I wanted to get into the business side of things. So I transitioned into customer service and got into running aspects of our aftermarket or customer service business. And then with GE, I was with a company, a private company that was acquired by GE, and then became the vice president general manager of that business, which was a,
Okay.
affiliate of GE Aviation today, what's known as GE Aviation today.
Okay.
Yeah.
What what were some of the important measures that were talked about, strived for in your time with GE?
Well, even before that, right, with Honeywell, I was with Allied
Okay.
Signal that acquired Honeywell and then took the Honeywell brand. Larry Bossidy came from GE to work there. So it's really easy when you're running a P&L. One of Larry Bossidy's phrases was, what part of make the numbers don't you understand?
Right.
So that really was his saying. And it's very simple. If you don't make the numbers, there's a line of people that would love to have the opportunity. So it's just not an option. And so you just kind of grow up in that environment. Everything's Mach 9, very high stress, high speed. As a young guy who loved aviation and loved business, I thrived in that environment. I
Mm,
really enjoyed it. The transition to GE was seamless because I had that background. And same thing, same speed, same pace, same focus. We did a lot of things that were around that. So it is about the numbers, but it's more than about the numbers. It's how you get the numbers. And a lot of people miss that. So we spent a lot of time on culture. We spent a lot of time on people and investing in people and management and leadership development. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year going into developing the team and developing talent, knowing that it's the leadership pipeline that creates the future for the business. Of course, you have to compete in the market. You have to be competitive. You have to win in the marketplace. But you can't do that and execute if you don't have the team behind you to do that. And so spending a lot of time on team, on culture, super, super important. And so I walked away with those things, right? And Preston, you and I are involved in some similar activity and some similar work. And we have a resource that we use called the talent assessment. That came from there, right? That was the
mm,
birthplace of that, where you were looking at culture and behavior, and the how you got things done was just as important as the what you got done. But the
yeah.
KPIs, non-negotiable, right? You had to make
Mm-hmm.
those.
Mm-hmm.
And
I wanna delve into that leadership a little bit. It like obviously, you said it was an important thing. One of the probably the most important thing in order to create a good culture, a good fit, right fit teammates. Was there ever a point through your career where you learned how wrong fit teammates can affect a business, or having bad leaders that kind of helped you learn that, okay, this is actually a very important thing that we need to work on?
yeah, I know. Uh, Maybe opening the curtain a little bit behind the scenes of your guys' podcast. The questionnaire that you sent me was, what's the worst job I ever had? And I think I replied, I've never had a worse job, but I've had a worse boss. I thoroughly enjoyed every position I've been in because I'm a learner, and so I could be proverbially in school every day, all day. I love to learn new stuff. I love to grow. There's always an opportunity when you're doing something new and exciting, learning from people. Uh, there are a lot of really smart people out there, and everybody has something to contribute if you'll take the time to listen and learn. But I have had some worse bosses, and I was able to not only learn from the good ones, the kinds of things I want to emulate myself, but I learned from the bad ones, the things that I absolutely 100% did not want to do.
What were some of those lessons from the bad ones that you learned?
So John Maxwell's always been a huge influence for me in leadership. I shouldn't say always, but for a large portion of my leadership career. And this idea that everything rises and falls on leadership is so true. And I see it all the time. He has one of his laws. He wrote the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And the number one law in what arguably is the number one leadership book out there is the law of the lid, which basically says, if you're a leader and your lid is here, your team can never outperform that lid, right? So for your team to grow, you have to grow. And when you look at that, you start looking at different aspects of leadership. And he wrote another book called The 5 Levels of Leadership. And level 1 leadership is all about position power. And that means people follow you because they have to. That's typically
because they're scared.
Well, they have to. You're the boss, right? So
Okay.
they can terminate you. They control your pay. You want the level 2 leadership is permission, and that's people are giving you permission to lead them because of the relationship that you have with them, right? You're acknowledging them, you're valuing them, you're allowing them to contribute, you're seeing them, you're investing in them, you're growing them. They want to follow leaders like that, right? The other one, you don't care. It's just because I said so, right?
Yeah.
Those to me are the worst. The people who are parked in that and who really manage through fear. And it's really heavy-handed, typically carrot and stick kind of stuff to motivate people. And what's really interesting is they are not getting the best out of their people, right? They might get results, but they're getting results through sheer force, right? And what they're getting from their people, though, is not a commitment. They're getting compliance. And there's a big difference in how people show up to work if they're committed versus if they're just complying with the rules. And what you end up with is a bunch of rule followers that aren't going to go the extra mile, do the extra thing. As a matter of fact, if they can help you fail, they absolutely will. If they see the freight train coming and you're the one standing on the tracks, they're just going to stand by and watch, right?
Well, I mean, it's boiling down to almost biblical terms. It's a leader versus a tyrant. It is Moses versus the Pharaoh. Pharaoh has the slaves, surrounded by all of his guards, and Moses is inviting them to go free into the promised land. It's a very big difference in leadership between a leader and a tyrant. Leaders invite, tyrants enforce.
It's a great analogy, right? And biblically, that's where the term servant leadership comes from, right? And whoever wants to be greatest, Jesus said, has to be the least. And this idea of serving other people, those are the most effective leaders because they're putting people ahead of themselves, and they're seeking to elevate others and add value to them so that they can perform and add value to other people. Yeah, it's night and day difference. And it's so easy to see, and everybody sees it except the person operating in that level 1 leadership. They think they're doing just fine.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Craig, because you're now giving Henry a whole new measuring system on my parenting. Henry's going to say, yeah, Dad, kind of doing the level 1 parenting thing here. You need to bump it up to the...
Yeah,
I'll be making report cards.
Yeah, don't do what I do. Just do what I told you to do.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Because I said so.
Because
that's right.
I said
100%. That's like parenting 101.
Yeah.
Parenting level 1.
Yeah, it is. It is. Level -1.
Right. So
hey, we've all done it. Henry, I've done it to my kids too. So
I'm not sure where the answer will go on this, but like what is leadership? It seems like it's a big concept for me to understand. I mean, I love it's the law of the lid's never been so clear until this morning when you actually literally with your hand just said, okay, you're here, nothing else goes above. Like the only way to get this above is have this go higher.
yeah.
So thank you for that clarity. But what is it if my leadership is to elevate, or that's one of my most important jobs in the position that I'm in the organization, what is it like maybe not how do we get there, but what does it look like if I'm that level 3, 4, 5 versus the 1 or 2?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. First of all, I think most people confuse management with leadership,
Hmm.
right? Just because I'm a supervisor, team leader, manager, baseball coach, soccer coach, classroom teacher, I'm in a position of authority. That does not mean I'm a leader, right? Um, the difference between a leader and a manager is the person taking the long walk, and you turn around and nobody's behind you. You're just taking a walk.
Hmm.
But if you turn around and you have a bunch of followers, you're probably a leader, right? And you're not a level 1 leader. You're probably at a minimum level 2 where people want to follow you. Level 3 is performance, right? People want to be on a winning team. So they're going to follow people and want to be on people's teams that are bringing the results and doing things for the business and for them. They want to be on that winning team for sure. And then level 4 is really all about producing other leaders. So this is the person who is adding value to people who are going to add value to people. So I'm creating leaders of leaders, and that's a multiplying effect, right? If I create more followers, that's just addition. But if I'm going to grow myself, if I'm going to grow my team, if I'm going to grow my business, if I'm going to grow my church, whatever it is, whatever organization or thing that I'm a part of, I have to invest my time in leaders who will invest their time in others to develop leaders, right? You want that perpetual leadership machine going. I have a dear friend who is very integral to Chick-fil-A's leadership development. And Truett Cathy, back in the day when he hired him, he gave him one task. Now this is, Chick-fil-A's in the billions now. Back then they were 400 million maybe. And he told him he had one job: make sure we never run out of leaders. And it's all about that leadership pipeline. And different than managers. Remember, I'm not talking about managers. These are people who can actually lead people. You can inspire people. You can motivate people. You can encourage people. You can kind of be a galvanizer, right? You're the person that rallies people around things and gets them excited about the future. Yeah, you're communicating vision. You're sharing vision. You're gaining commitment. You're making sure the team is aligned around those things and all marching in the same direction. Much more inspirational than perspirational, right?
Yeah. Craig, I don't know if you're a big movie or TV show enjoyer, but I always seem to connect lessons in life or to, I guess, stories in movies or TV shows or vice versa. Art imitates life and all that. And I've been thinking about, as you've been talking about these different levels, I don't know if you've seen the show Band of Brothers, but I feel like that's a prime example of leadership. Like you have Captain Winters leading Easy Company, and then he gets promoted to major. Someone has to fill a spot, and the guys that are filling a spot are not leaders. And you see the effects of more managers than leaders in their platoon, and they end up paying the price for it in lives. And it's that. I mean, that's a very over-exaggerated example of what happens when you have managers or tyrants versus leaders, but I still think it rings true to that example.
Yeah, I think it's I don't think it's an overreach. If you think about a military example, that's probably the clearest example of position power, right? And authority, chain of command. And so that really differentiates somebody who is a leader that people want to follow, right? Think of a Churchill or a Winters versus people who just, they're dogmatic and it's all about because I said so. Even modern military has changed dramatically in how they lead and how they do teams. You think of special forces and how they assemble teams, and rank kind of goes out the door when the job has to be done, right? It's the right person for the right spot on that team, for that particular mission is super critical, right? You can't just have people barking orders for the sake of barking orders.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, Craig, that's I love the dictation addition, multiplication, if I think of it that way. So
Mm.
I'm going to dictate things and people are going to follow, maybe largely out of fear, or certainly out of wanting to avoid some negative consequence. Addition, a bunch of folks come along with, that's fine. That's such a powerful concept of that multiplication. And that seems overlooked. And frankly, if I look in the mirror, such a great reminder for me, again, in the role that I play in our organization. I would assert the role I play in my family and in my community as well, that I say a key distinction for me is the not being willing to give away or not take, accept the credit. And that the good work that's being done is that others are more aligned with their purpose, accomplishing what they're setting out to accomplish, or better yet, actually creating leaders themselves. And to be able to look back and say, at the very least, I played a part in that. But to, again, go back to that concept of that servant leader, that I'm doing a good job serving and stewarding. The result of it, the measure might be that others are leading effectively. It's such a great frame. And we all confront it, you and I, especially, Craig, in the work that we do,
Yeah.
where we meet some people, amazing people that are very capable of leading in that fashion. We also see a lot of folks in leadership roles that depend on that authority, dictation, and fear mongering, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah. The good news is in the work that we do, those are not my clients.
You just say
Right?
no.
Yeah. Say no. I have no desire to work for that
Yeah.
person. It's just not worth the lift, I want the person that's already bought in. They're investing in themselves. They're investing in their team. They love their team. They want to scale and grow their business. They're excited about how they can impact and create a life for people and impact the communities that they serve and their clients. That's just a whole different type of person to engage with than just the dictator that just wants more for themselves, right?
Well, it's like how you said, it's how you do something is just as important, if not more, than what you're actually doing. If the goal is to get a revenue goal by the end of the year for a business, how are you going to do that? You could do a million different ways. Is how you do it is create more leaders in your organization that are capable of doing it, instead of trying to drag everyone along with you to this finish line.
Yeah. It's one of the things, Preston, I don't know if I've shared this with you in the past, but one of the things I have my clients do is, and we keep certain companies in business because we use a lot of sticky notes and things like that.
Right.
We do. Henry's like, yeah, I've seen my dad and his sticky notes everywhere. The one of the things I have them do right off the bat is just write on a sticky note, I am not scalable, and stick it on their computer. So they remember that every single day. That's why multiplication is so important. The smaller the business, the more difficult it is, because I don't have a team yet, right? Maybe I've just hired my first employee ever. You go through these stages, right? Sometimes it's tied to revenue. The bigger the revenue, you can kind of guesstimate that they're going to have a more complex organization. They're going to have more issues. They're going to have more systems in place and things like that. So directionally, that's true. But sometimes it depends on the industry you're in. You could be in a service business that has very high revenue and not a lot of employees. You could be in a manufacturing type, blue collar type of business that has a lot of employees and less revenue, right? So it all depends. But all of that to say, if you're going to grow, regardless of the type of business you're in, you can't be the boss of everybody. You can't be the one doing everything. You can't be the rainmaker and the operations person and the bookkeeper and the talent manager, right? But that's what happens, because as a business grows, you haven't staffed. You weren't thinking that way. It just kind of catches up to you. And next thing you know, you're burnt out, you're fried, you can't take it anymore. The business you used to love, you hate. I mean, you're very familiar with this, Preston. We see it all the time. So one of the best ways to get freedom is to get leaders.
Mhm.
And if you can start developing leaders who will develop leaders, the growth opportunity is really, to an extent, limitless.
Yeah, that's, I may be putting you on the spot a little bit with this question, but what was the tipping point for you? Because I'm imagining, Craig, that you've had one of those sticky notes on your computer screen uh, for some time. What was it for you that had you kind of realize, what you're doing, how what it looks like could be just a great business as is, with like Craig Huston, like doing amazing work with people. And I know you and I have had conversations because we're in similar places now where there's been, at least my interpretation is, there's been a transition for you around, yeah, it could be me, or I could actually transition this from being just Craig and a few folks to actually something more. And almost the scale, like, in other words, what's been the transition for you to think about scaling your business, and
Yeah.
and why? Because I don't know, status quo seems like it's pretty good.
Yeah, status quo is pretty good. So that's a great question, Preston, and it hasn't been an easy answer. Historically, you just go through seasons and different types of roles. I mean, sometimes you're in an individual contributor role, sometimes you're in a role that is a supervisory managerial role where you're leading people, you're leading teams. And sometimes you find yourself leading entire organizations, right? And each one of those requires different skill sets, different mindsets even. But then you end up in a place. I've got a little bit of water under the bridge, and you get to a place where, when I started this business in 2016, so almost 10 years ago, it was a lifestyle business. I make a little money or a lot of money, and whatever, you make what you want to make because you work as hard as you want to work.
Mm-hmm.
I am not scalable, right? There's 24 hours a day, so I have the same 24 hours everybody else has. But you get to a point where it's like, hey, I can control when I go on vacation. I can pretty much just do whatever I want to do. And there's something comfortable about that, right? But then you realize it gets to this question of purpose. Like, okay, is that really why I'm here? I've lived a pretty good life, and I want to be able to have a positive impact on people. And through coaching and through spending time at church and ministry and a lot of coaching and counseling, one of the things that you hear a lot is, particularly with business owners, is a lot of regret.
Mm.
And it's actually really sad. You see people, we know that statistically 80% of businesses are not going to sell. Now, we're not talking about Fortune 500 companies, publicly traded companies. We're talking about really the backbone of the American economy, which are small businesses, right? And 80% of those small businesses are never going to sell. Basically, they're just going to be gone. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Some of them are lifestyle businesses, right? The lifestyle business basically is a job that the owner has. And when the owner's done, the business is done. So those go away. It's difficult to sell a lifestyle business. But if you have a business that is a growth-oriented business, a value-creating business that you can sell, oftentimes they don't. The owner's just not prepared for it, or maybe there's an unfortunate circumstance, a health issue, or any number of other things, a global pandemic. There's all kinds of things that can come along and wipe a business out, but it's just gone. It's relegated to the memory of the few that knew about it, and then ultimately that fades. But then there are businesses that do sell, those 20% that do, and we know from research that a year later, if you go circle back a year later and you ask those people who had this transition how they're doing, 75% claim to deeply regret the transaction, right? There's some level of regret. There's some level of disappointment 3/4 of the time. And that's 3/4 of 20%. So we're really talking in the 2 out of 100 business owners that actually have a reasonable exit where they check all the boxes. They're super happy with how things went. And to me, that is like a horrible statistic. And so as I'm sitting here working with my clients and helping them prevent that regret from happening, and working with my coach, I always tell people never hire a coach that doesn't have a coach, right? If you say you believe in coaching, you better have a coach. So to all the coaches out there that are listening, I hope you have a coach. And if you're thinking about hiring a coach, ask them who their coach is. And if they don't answer it, move on to another coach. The whole idea around it was like, wow, I don't see myself just limiting my impact to the handful of clients that I have. What if I could affect 100 owners or 1,000 owners or more? How could I do that? And if my purpose then becomes put a target on the back of regret, right? Let's go just squash regret, and let's turn that 2 out of 100 into 3, into 4, into 5, into 10, and keep that growing. Well, I'm not scalable. So only way I can do that is through engaging others. And so I've got 2 coaches that I'm working with now, and we're working on a process to begin doing that, and through a mastermind affecting 10 to 12 businesses at a time, and helping them prepare for whatever their end game is so that they don't end up on the regret side. They end up in that 2 out of 100 side, at least at the beginning. And then we want to expand that literally across the country. So we have a pro forma that goes out 10 years that tells us how we can impact 10,000 companies and what it would take to do that. So that's a transition for me, is realizing, you know what, I would be happy financially, but I wouldn't be happy content-wise knowing that I could have helped somebody that we didn't reach just because we didn't feel like doing it.
Mm-hmm. How the regret that you've come across in the businesses you've worked with, how much of it is things they regret not doing when they had an opportunity versus things they did and they regret doing? Because it sounds like in your example, during this transition between lifestyle change, you may have been starting to think, oh, I'm going to regret not making this transition, for example. So how much of it is not doing something versus doing something?
I don't know that that's an easy question to answer. So good question, Henry. What I'm talking about is the regret that comes with a lack of preparation or a lack of knowledge. So a couple of different things happen. One, and I'm only going to talk about the businesses that sell, right? So I'll get a phone call, for example, and these are legit, real phone calls. These happen. And because I've transitioned more into business coaching, I'll get calls from people I know that say, are you still doing one-on-one coaching? And usually these people, they're not strangers. These are people I know. These are friends. And I'll say, well, it depends what happened, or what's happening. And it's amazing how frequently it goes something like this. Well, Craig, I sold my business and I don't think I can do this. And what they're talking about is the other side of that sale, where there's some sort of engagement, some sort of earnout, right? Some period where they're working for somebody else. So they went from owning their own business, now they're working for another person. That's difficult. They've got a corporate, now it not necessarily, it doesn't have to be corporate, but they've got some structure, some organizational requirements. They've got metrics they have to meet, right? And some people would say, hey, fair turn, right? You've been holding other people accountable. Now somebody else is holding you accountable. But they're not really used to that. And so it's a mental shift, right? And so you can coach people through that. Absolutely, you can coach people through that. The unfortunate thing is they make the call after it's done. And so much could have been done beforehand had you known. And so I will say something like, You know me, you know what I do, you know how I help people. I didn't even know your business was for sale. And they'll say something along the lines, well, it really wasn't, but I got a call. And they get that call, it's often unsolicited, and they weren't thinking about selling, and it sounds like a lot of money. And in some cases, relatively speaking, it is a lot of money. The problem is most people who buy companies buy a lot of companies. Not everybody, but the majority. Most people who sell companies sell one company. Again, some people sell more than one. But 80-20 rule, right? 80% of buyers buy more than one, and 80% of sellers sell only one. So you end up with a very sophisticated buyer and a very unsophisticated seller. And not that somebody's trying to rip somebody off, but the buyer wants to get the most value they can get at the lowest price they can get it for, and in the most favorable terms they can get it for. The seller doesn't understand that often. And these are smart people. This isn't because somebody's dumb. They're just naive. They don't know what they don't know. And people are friendly, but they're not your friend. They know how to get what they want. And so you're being negotiated on and worked constantly from day one, from that first call, that first meeting. And so what ends up happening is they end up with terms that end up being unfavorable often. They end up with earnouts that almost never get paid out because there's not clear definitions, there's not clear expectations, there's not a lot of clarity around this, and this have to happen in order to get this, and the rules change. And so there's a term in the industry called retrading. And what will often happen is they'll throw out a price, they'll get to a number, you're going to agree to this number, you're going to head down the road of due diligence, and you put all this time and effort, in a lot of cases, a lot of money. You're exhausted. You've been through this horrendous experience, and at the end, they say, you get the actual offer, and it's not what they said it was going to be. And it's actually lower because we found blah, 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 blah. And that's called retrading. That happens way too often. And if you don't have good representation, you're not hiring a good broker, you don't have a good transaction attorney on your side, you're going to probably get taken advantage of. And so that can lead to regret. A lot of times people, they haven't thought through what the financial needs are that they have after the sale of the business, right? The business isn't paying for their car anymore. The business isn't paying for that trip anymore. The business isn't doing a lot of things that maybe the business did in the past. And now that falls on you. And maybe you thought you were okay financially. You thought you needed $1 million to be exactly set where you are. You've got other income streams. Maybe you have other assets. You only need $1 million. You sell it for $1 million. You forget that you have fees, taxes, things like that eat away at that $1 million. And now you're holding 600,000 and you're short, right? They didn't get good advice. They didn't get good counsel. But one of, I think, the worst types of regret is they didn't have a plan for their life after the business. They're not going to something. They're coming from something. And so they don't know who they are. They've lost their identity because their identity's been tied up in the business. They're the person who owns Company X. Company X sponsors all these events in the community. Company X is represented on the boards of all these organizations. Company X advertises here, Company X sponsors here. And now the phone's not ringing anymore because you can't do anything for anybody because you're not affiliated with that any longer. And that can be a very lonely place to be for business owners. So getting them prepared for the next steps, making sure they have a plan and they have a purpose that they're going toward after the fact. Could be starting a new business, could be transitioning to their kids, could be transitioning to employees or management team, helping them be successful. Could be going to volunteer for your favorite charity and Could be spending the rest of your life with your grandkids, spoiling them rotten, right? But as long as you have something you're going to with purpose, that checks that box. Having your financial gap understood and closed checks that box. Having your business fully ready for maximum value, make sure that you're getting what you deserve to get for that business. Well, everybody gets what they deserve to get. I'll let that sink in for a minute. But we want you to deserve more. How about that?
Well, it's, you know,
That's a long answer. Sorry about that.
well, no,
No,
it's
it's a good
great
answer.
because you're, there's a number of like, I mean, if I simplify it, take a swing at simplifying it, there's some very pragmatic things. So the regret of paying too much, it costs too much exiting my business. The regret of feeling like I got screwed over in some way, shape, or form. But the one, Craig, that just seems to be, I'm wondering if some of the sting from experiencing that, and I'm imagining anybody that has been in business, period, whether you've sold or not, just the day-to-day negotiations you go through with employees, with suppliers, with clients or customers, that I have not yet met someone who said, yes, every time I have gotten my way. I've not yet met that person. So life's a constant negotiation. But the thing that seems to be very powerful in my experience with owners that have successfully sold or exited their business is that piece where they're just not clear. They didn't do the work before exiting to get clear on answering some bigger questions. What is next? Or literally, like, who am I? I mean, look, really big questions.
Yeah.
That would help them understand, help them make the transition. In other words, in some of the tools we use, there's this great question in one of the assessments. If you're at a cocktail party and somebody asks you what you do, would you answer, I own a business, or I'm a business owner? And the psychology behind that question fascinates me.
Yeah.
Because there is an answer that would be more closely related to someone who is perhaps clearer about what they're working toward versus what they're running away from or trying to get away from.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, what are some ways that owners, perhaps all of us, can spend a little bit more time or do a little bit more work around distinguishing, a longer game for ourselves, whether you call it a purpose, whether you call it a mission, like actually getting, be able to wrap our heads around that a little bit more.
Yeah, boy, it's a deep question, right? There's people that will go on long spiritual retreats to try to figure that out, right? They'll climb a mountain and do a lot of meditation and seek a lot of different things to try to answer that question.
And then come back and still be unhappy.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I think I have a little bit of a different perspective. Just, I'm a person of faith and have a biblical view of life and eternity. So this lifespan, as far as I'm concerned, is really small in the grand scheme of eternity. And so my identity lies there, and not to be churchy about it, but I'd say, my identity lies in who I believe that I am in Christ, more than anything else. And that causes me to be challenged to love people and to care about people and to seek people's best, right? And to do good by other people in many, many different ways, whatever that looks like. But in essence, called to a life of service. And so as a business owner, I think you're serving your people. You're serving your people's families. We forget about that, right? It's not just the people who work for us, but it's the families and the extended families, not even just the immediate family, that are all impacted often by a decision that we make as a business owner, right, can have this ripple effect, and that then spills into the communities that those people live in and that we do work in. And so wanting to show up in a certain way, and be respectful of everybody, be that person that and that business that shows up in a way that's giving, kind of more than they're receiving. It's a mindset and an attitude. And I think mindset is a lot of it. It's really difficult often for business owners to let go of that identity, right? Because if I am a business owner, I'm in trouble when I no longer am a business owner. My identity's been split once that business is gone. But if I own a business, I can own another business.
Mm-hmm.
I can own any business. I own a car. I can trade in that car and get another car. I can own a house. Well, you can own a business. So the perspective and the psychology of that is really powerful. So, if you find something that you're passionate about, that you really feel strongly about and get involved in that, and you're engaged in the community, that has a powerful effect. I think too many people spend all their time building a network for business. So their entire circle of influence, their entire friend circle, it's all business related, and they don't have anything outside of business. So when that goes away, they lose their context, right? And now they're just out there floating without meaning or purpose. So having true friends and people that are engaged in things that you also are passionate about, that's a really big deal.
Yeah,
It's community.
that's so
It's
powerful.
community.
Absolutely, and you're bringing this back for me to kind of where we started this conversation off a while back around just what leadership means and what makes for a good leader. That it's about helping others become leaders, multiplying yourself or your leadership, if you will, because then it's ultimately not about you. Whereas that kind of that authoritarian model, level one, or the get people to follow you, level two, just isn't. Well, for me, put it back in the context of I'm a business owner. I'm identifying myself like I'm a leader, or I help create leaders, because you could create leaders in a lot of different places and contexts.
Yeah.
Versus if you are not the leader and you are claiming you are one, when you're not, there goes your identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so great just wrapping that around, and just that almost that distancing yourself from the thing you're stewarding, and to position yourself and get that perspective that you're stewarding a business, or you're stewarding your family, or you're stewarding your community, but that business, family, or community doesn't define you.
Yeah. And stewardship is such a great word, Preston. When you approach your business as if you're a steward of it, it's a whole different level of responsibility. It's actually more responsibility than just owning it, because a steward is watching over something that belongs to something else. So if I believe that my business belongs to, let's say, in my case, I'm going to say that, hey, God owns everything. Listen, my opportunities come from him. He can take it away in a heartbeat. I don't see him as some ogre with a big beard in a club just waiting to smack you. But business is fickle. So many things can take a business under that are outside a person's control. And if that is you, that's pretty high risk emotionally.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Just from a mental health perspective, just to say I'm putting all of my mental health and well-being in this idea that this business defines me. Because that can change in a heartbeat. It's like health, right? Nobody, the statistics are in, 10 out of 10 people are going to die.
Right.
We just don't know when, right? But bad things happen. Bad things happen to good people.
Well, you do know that most statistics, most metrics are made up 74% of the time, right?
There you go. That's it. I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. So, yeah, I think if people can find an identity that's bigger than themselves, makes all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to a podcast. Dave Ramsey was the guest, and the interviewer asked, he started a question by saying, "Tell me what it's like owning your business." And Ramsey just says, "Well, I don't own it." And the interviewer goes, "What? What do you mean?" He goes, "It's God's business. I just been asked to shepherd it."
Yep.
Like, oh, man, that is just, there you go. Like you just, clearly understand the role and not identifying himself with what has turned out to be a very successful business for Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, $200 million.
There's always
business,
a bigger coach, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Always a bigger coach. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end our conversation. Craig, thank you so much for joining on. This has been a really, really great conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I hope everyone listening does as well.
Yeah, thank you, Preston. Thank you, Henry.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Where can people find your business? Where can people get in touch with you?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just Craig Huston, Huston, as the LinkedIn profile. And then summitachievers.com is the website.
Thank you again, Craig. Wishing you a good rest of your day, and hope to hear from you soon.
Yeah, thank you.